The following Saturday, Sarah found herself standing in front of a large colonial-style house in the most expensive neighborhood in town, holding Emma's hand and trying to calm her nerves. The house was everything she had imagined and more, with perfectly manicured lawns, tall windows, and a circular driveway where David's black Mercedes sat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Emma squeezed her mother's hand and whispered, "Mama, it's like a castle." Before Sarah could respond, the front door opened and David emerged, followed by a small boy with dark hair and serious brown eyes. Marcus was thin for his 8 years, and there was something guarded about the way he stayed close to his father's side, studying Sarah and Emma with careful attention. "Sarah, Emma, I'm so glad you could come," David said warmly. "Marcus, this is the lady I told you about, Mrs. Martinez, and her daughter Emma." Marcus nodded politely, but didn't speak. Emma, never shy around other children, stepped forward with a bright smile. "Hi, Marcus. My mama said you have a big house. Do you have any toys?" For the first time, Marcus's serious expression softened slightly. "Yeah, I have lots of toys. Do you want to see my room?" "Can I, Mama?" Emma looked up at Sarah hopefully. "Of course, sweetheart. That sounds wonderful." As the children headed inside, David gestured for Sarah to follow. He's been nervous about today. I think Emma's enthusiasm is exactly what he needs. The inside of the house was as impressive as the exterior, with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But, despite its beauty, there was something cold about the space, as if it were a showroom rather than a family home. David led her to a spacious living room where large windows overlooked a backyard that seemed to stretch on forever. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, tea, water?" "Water would be great, thank you." Sarah settled onto the sofa, trying not to feel overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. When David returned with 2 glasses of water, he sat across from her rather than beside her, maintaining the professional distance that had characterized their relationship so far. "What do you think of the house?" he asked. "It's beautiful. Much bigger than I expected. Too big, really, for just Marcus and me." Catherine loved entertaining, so she insisted on all this space. Now it just feels empty most of the time. Sarah could hear the children's voices and footsteps upstairs, punctuated by Emma's delighted laughter. They seemed to be getting along well. "Marcus hasn't laughed like that in months," David said quietly. "I think Emma is going to be very good for him." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of children playing together. It was a sound that had been missing from both their lives for too long. "David, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. What was Catherine like? I mean, if I'm going to be living in her house, taking care of her son, I think I should know something about her." David's expression grew thoughtful, and he was quiet for so long that Sarah began to worry she had overstepped. "Catherine was vibrant," he said finally. "She lit up every room she entered. She was social, outgoing, always organizing dinner parties or charity events. She loved beautiful things, fashion, art, travel. She was a wonderful mother to Marcus, very attentive and affectionate." "She sounds amazing." "She was. But she was also high maintenance in ways that I didn't fully appreciate until after she was gone. The house always had to be perfect. Our social calendar was always full. Everything had to be done just so. I realize now how much work it was for her to maintain the life she wanted us to have." Sarah sensed there was more to the story, but didn't push. "Do you think Marcus will be okay with me being here? I'm very different from how you've described his mother." "That's exactly why I think this will work. Marcus has been trying so hard to keep everything perfect since Catherine died, as if he thinks that will bring her back. You're real, Sarah. You're warm and genuine, and you don't pretend that life is always beautiful and easy. He needs that authenticity." Just then, Emma's voice carried down from upstairs. "Marcus, do you want to see my coloring book? I brought my good crayons." "Your daughter is a treasure," David said with a smile. "I can see where she gets her kindness. She's excited about having a playmate. She's never had siblings or cousins to play with. Neither has Marcus. I think they're going to be good for each other." The children eventually came downstairs, Emma chattering excitedly about all the things she had seen in Marcus's room. Marcus remained quiet, but Sarah noticed he stayed close to Emma, seemingly drawn to her enthusiastic energy. "Marcus has a train set, Mama. A huge one with bridges and tunnels and everything." And he said maybe I could help him build a new track. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Sarah looked at Marcus. Do you like building things? Marcus nodded. My dad taught me how. We used to build lots of things together before. He trailed off, and Sarah's heart ached for him. Before your mama went to heaven? Emma asked with the blunt innocence of a 6-year-old. Marcus looked surprised that she had mentioned it so directly. Yeah, my papa went to heaven too, Emma said matter-of-factly. It's really sad, but Mama says he's watching over us, and he wants us to be happy. Marcus stared at Emma with something like wonder, as if he had never met another child who understood loss. Do you miss him? Marcus asked quietly. Every day? But Mama helps me remember the fun stuff we did together, and that makes me feel better. Sarah glanced at David and saw that he was watching the interaction with intense interest. This was clearly not a conversation Marcus had been able to have with other children. Maybe you could tell me about your mama sometime, Emma continued. I bet she was really nice. She was, Marcus said softly. She smelled like flowers and she always sang to me before bed. That's beautiful, Sarah said gently. She sounds like she was a very special mama. Marcus looked at her directly for the first time since they'd arrived. Dad says you might come live with us. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She glanced at David, who looked slightly embarrassed. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I know we agreed to take things slowly, but Marcus asked me directly about why you were coming over today. I didn't want to lie to him. It's okay, Sarah said, then turned to Marcus. What do you think about that idea? Marcus considered the question seriously. Would Emma come too? Yes, we would both come. And you would take care of me like Emma's mama? I would try my best to take care of both of you. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I think that would be okay. Emma clapped her hands together. Does that mean we're going to live in the castle house? It's not a castle, silly, Marcus said, but he was almost smiling. It's just a big house. It looks like a castle to me. The rest of the afternoon passed more easily than Sarah had dared hope. The children played together while she and David talked about practical matters, school arrangements, daily routines, household rules. It was strange discussing such intimate details of life with someone who was essentially a stranger, but David was thoughtful and reasonable about everything. I should probably get Emma home soon, Sarah said as the afternoon wore on. It's almost her dinner time. Of course. But before you go, would you like to see the rest of the house? The rooms that would be yours and Emma's? Sarah nodded, and they gathered the children for a quick tour. The house was even more impressive than she had initially thought, with 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a formal dining room, a family room, and a kitchen that was bigger than her entire current apartment. This would be Emma's room, David said, opening the door to a sunny bedroom with pale yellow walls and windows overlooking the backyard. And this would be yours, he added, showing her the room next door. Sarah's room was larger than any bedroom she had ever had, with an attached bathroom and a walk-in closet that could have housed her entire current wardrobe 10 times over. But what struck her most was how impersonal it felt, like a guest room in a hotel. I know it's a bit stark right now, David said, seeming to read her thoughts. Catherine designed the whole house, so it reflects her taste. But please feel free to change anything you want to make it feel more like home. What about your room? Sarah asked, then immediately felt awkward about the question. At the other end of the hall, complete privacy for both of us. As they finished the tour and prepared to leave, Marcus surprised everyone by giving Emma a shy hug goodbye. Will you come back soon? He asked her. I hope so. Maybe next time you can show me how the trains work. On the drive home, Emma chattered nonstop about Marcus and the house and all the things they could do together. Sarah listened with half her attention while the other half of her mind processed everything she had seen and learned. The house was beautiful but felt more like a museum than a home. Marcus was sweet but clearly struggling with grief and loneliness. David seemed genuine and kind but remained somewhat distant, as if he were conducting a business transaction rather than building a relationship. But beneath all her reservations, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Hope that Emma would have opportunities and advantages Sarah could never provide alone. Hope that Marcus might find some healing through having a mother figure and a sister. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could build something resembling a normal family life again. That evening, David called to check how Emma had felt about the visit. She loved it, Sarah reported. She's already planning all the things she and Marcus can do together. And what about you? How did you feel about it? Sarah considered the question carefully. Honestly, overwhelmed. The house is incredible, and Marcus seems like a wonderful boy, but it's all so different from anything I've known. Different how? David, I've been poor for most of my life. Even when Miguel was alive, we struggled financially. Living in a house like yours, having that kind of comfort and luxury, I'm not sure I'll know how to handle it. Money doesn't change who you are, Sarah. You'll still be the same caring, hard-working person you've always been. But what if I don't fit in? What if the neighbors think I'm some kind of gold digger who tricked you into marriage? What if Marcus realizes I'm not sophisticated like his mother was? David was quiet for a moment. Sarah, can I tell you something about Catherine that I didn't mention earlier? Of course. She grew up wealthy. She never had to worry about money, never had to make hard choices about what to spend on groceries versus what to spend on rent. She was a wonderful woman, but she never really understood what it meant to sacrifice for someone you love the way you've sacrificed for Emma. I'm not criticizing her. I know you're not. But what I'm trying to say is that Marcus needs someone who understands struggle, who can teach him that real strength comes from getting through difficult times, not from having everything handed to you. He needs someone like you. I'm scared, David. Of what specifically? Of messing this up. Of not being good enough for Marcus. Of Emma getting too attached. And then having it all fall apart. Those are all legitimate fears. But, Sarah, what's the alternative? You continue working yourself to death at jobs that barely pay the bills. Emma continues to do without things she needs because you can't afford them. You both remain stuck in a cycle of just surviving instead of actually living. He was right, and she knew it. But knowing something logically and feeling comfortable with it emotionally were two different things. When do you want to move forward with the legal arrangements? She asked. Whenever you're ready. I can have the marriage contract drawn up within a few days, and we could be married by the end of next week if that works for you. A week? Sarah's voice squeaked slightly. Too fast. No, I suppose not. There's no point in dragging it out. And Emma starts asking questions if things hang in limbo too long. What will you tell her about the marriage part? The truth, in terms she can understand. That you and I are going to be partners in taking care of her and Marcus. And that sometimes when adults are partners like that, they get married to make it official. That sounds perfect. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah met with David's lawyer to review the marriage contract, which was more comprehensive than she had expected, but entirely fair. In addition to paying off her debts, David agreed to put money aside for both children's college educations, provide Sarah with a generous monthly allowance for personal expenses, and ensure that if the marriage ended, she would receive enough money to get established independently. She gave notice at both her jobs, a conversation that was both liberating and terrifying. Frank at the diner was predictably unpleasant about her departure, making crude comments about her finding a sugar daddy, but Sarah found that his words couldn't hurt her anymore. She was moving on to something better. The hardest part was explaining the situation to Mrs. Rodriguez, who had become like a grandmother to Emma. Mija, are you sure about this man? The elderly woman asked over coffee in Sarah's soon-to-be former kitchen. Marriage is a serious thing, even when it's for practical reasons. I'm as sure as I can be, Sarah replied. He's a good man, Mrs. Rodriguez. He loves his son, and he wants to take care of Emma and me. That's more than a lot of women get in marriage. But what about love? What about romance? You're still a young woman, Sarah. Love didn't pay Miguel's medical bills or keep the lights on after he died. Sometimes practical is more important than romantic. Mrs. Rodriguez reached across the table and patted Sarah's hand. You have a good heart, Mija. Just don't forget that you deserve to be happy. Not just Sarah. Martinez stared at the stack of unpaid bills scattered across her kitchen table, her coffee growing cold as the morning sun filtered through the worn curtains of her small apartment. It had been 8 months since her husband Miguel died in that terrible construction accident, and the weight of single motherhood pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket she couldn't shake off. Her 6-year-old daughter Emma sat at the same table, carefully coloring in her princess coloring book, completely unaware of her mother's financial struggles. Emma's innocent chatter about her upcoming school play filled the silence. But Sarah's mind was elsewhere, calculating numbers that never seemed to add up right. "Mama, look, I made Princess Belle's dress yellow like sunshine," Emma announced proudly, holding up her artwork. Sarah forced a smile and nodded. "It's beautiful, sweetheart, just like sunshine." The irony wasn't lost on her that there seemed to be very little sunshine in their lives lately. The apartment they shared was a far cry from the modest house they'd owned when Miguel was alive. After his death, Sarah discovered that their savings had been depleted by medical bills from his father's cancer treatment the year before. Miguel had never told her about the loans he'd taken against the house, and when the insurance settlement came, it barely covered the debts. Sarah worked 2 jobs now. During the day, she served tables at a busy diner downtown, smiling at customers while her feet ached and her back screamed for rest. In the evenings, she cleaned office buildings until late at night, often not getting home until Emma was already asleep with Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor who watched her for a small fee. The diner job was particularly challenging. The manager, Frank, was a middle-aged man with a beer gut and wandering eyes who made Sarah uncomfortable with his comments and unnecessary touches. But she needed the job desperately, so she endured his behavior and focused on the tips that helped pay for Emma's school supplies and clothes. "You're looking tired today, Sarah," Frank said one afternoon as she wiped down tables. "Maybe you need some time off." Of course, you know what they say about time off around here. Sarah knew exactly what he meant. Frank had a reputation for cutting hours for employees who didn't play along with his inappropriate behavior. She had heard whispers from other waitresses about his expectations, but she had managed to avoid any serious confrontations so far. "I'm fine, Frank. Just focused on work," she replied, not looking up from the table she was cleaning. That evening, as Sarah walked home from her cleaning job, she noticed a man in an expensive suit standing outside her apartment building. He was tall, probably in his early 40s, with salt-in, pepper hair, and an air of confidence that suggested wealth and success. He seemed to be waiting for someone. As she approached the building entrance, the man stepped forward. "Excuse me, are you Sarah Martinez?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Strange men asking for her by name usually meant bad news, debt collectors, or legal troubles. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" The man smiled, and his whole demeanor changed from intimidating to warm. "My name is David Henley. I own several businesses here in town. I've been asking around about you." "Asking around about me? What?" Sarah clutched her purse tighter, ready to run if necessary. David raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Nothing alarming, I assure you. I've heard that you're a hard-working single mother, and, frankly, I have a proposition that might benefit both of us." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of deception or danger. He seemed genuine, but she had learned to be cautious about men who approached her with propositions. "What kind of proposition?" she asked carefully. "Perhaps we could discuss this over coffee tomorrow? There's a cafe called Sunrise on Main Street. Do you know it?" Sarah did know it. It was a public place, busy during the day, which made her feel safer about the idea of meeting him. Still, she hesitated. "Look," David continued, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a business card. "I understand your caution. Here's my information. You can look me up, ask around town about me. I'm not trying to trick you or harm you in any way. I just think we might be able to help each other." Sarah took the business card and read it. David Henley, CEO of Henley Enterprises. The address listed was in the upscale part of town where all the successful businesses were located. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Henley?" David glanced around the street, then back at her. "It's complicated, and I'd rather explain it properly when we have more time and privacy. But, in simple terms, I need someone to help me with my family situation, and, in return, I can help you with your financial situation." The words family situation and financial situation caught Sarah's attention immediately. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them entirely comforting. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, if you're interested. If you don't show up, I'll understand, and you'll never see me again." That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah sat at her computer researching David Henley. What she found surprised her. He was indeed a successful businessman, owner of 3 restaurants and 2 small hotels in the area. His net worth was estimated in the millions according to a local business magazine article from the previous year. But What caught her attention most was a society page photo from 2 years earlier showing David at a charity gala with a beautiful woman in an elegant dress. The caption identified her as David's wife, Catherine Henley. Sarah searched for more recent photos, but couldn't find any that included Catherine. The next morning, Sarah dropped Emma off at school and found herself standing outside Sunrise Cafe at exactly 10 o'clock. She had changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple blue dress that was professional but not too formal. Her hands shook slightly as she pushed open the cafe door. David was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee waiting. He stood when he saw her and smiled warmly. "Sarah, thank you for coming. Please sit down." As she settled into the chair across from him, Sarah noticed how different he looked in the daylight. There were tired lines around his eyes, and his smile seemed forced, like someone trying very hard to appear happier than he actually was. "I ordered you a coffee. I hope that's all right. I wasn't sure how you liked it, so I got cream and sugar on the side." "Thank you," Sarah said, adding cream to her coffee while studying his face. "Mr. Henley, I looked you up last night. I expected you would. Smart woman. What did you find? That you're successful, wealthy, and apparently married." David's expression darkened slightly. "Was married. My wife Catherine died in a car accident 14 months ago." "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, and she meant it. She knew the pain of losing a spouse, even under different circumstances. "Thank you. It's been difficult. Which brings me to why I wanted to talk to you." David leaned forward slightly. "Catherine and I have a son, Marcus. He's 8 years old, and he's been struggling terribly since his mother died." Sarah felt a pang of sympathy. "That must be heartbreaking for both of you." "It is. Marcus has become withdrawn, his grades are suffering, and he barely speaks to me anymore. The therapist says he needs stability, a maternal figure, a sense of normal family life again." David paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've tried hiring nannies, but he rejects them all. He sees right through the professional relationship. I still don't understand what this has to do with me." David took a deep breath. "I've been watching you, Sarah. Not in a creepy way," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "I mean, I've noticed you around town with your daughter. I've seen how you interact with her, how patient and loving you are even when you're clearly exhausted. I've heard people talk about what a good mother you are, how hard you work to take care of your family." Sarah remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "Marcus needs a mother figure, Sarah. Not a nanny, not a babysitter, but someone who genuinely cares about him. Someone who understands what it means to love a child unconditionally. And you think I could be that person? I think you already are that person. The question is whether you'd be willing to extend that love to include my son." Sarah set down her coffee cup, her mind reeling. "Mr. Henley, are you asking me to be some kind of live-in caregiver for your son?" "No," David said quietly. "I'm asking you to marry me." The words hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Sarah felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the cafe. She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Marry you? You don't even know me. We just met yesterday." "I know enough," David said calmly. "I know you're a good person, a devoted mother, someone who understands responsibility and sacrifice. I know you're struggling financially and that you need help. This would solve both our problems." Sarah's mind raced through a dozen different emotions. Shock, confusion, anger, and, beneath it all, a tiny seed of hope that she was afraid to acknowledge. This is insane. People don't just marry strangers because they have complementary problems, don't they? Sarah, this wouldn't be about romance or love, at least not initially. This would be a practical arrangement that benefits everyone involved. Marcus gets a stable mother figure. You and Emma get financial security, and I get peace of mind knowing my son is being cared for by someone who actually gives a damn about children. What exactly are you proposing? David reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I've thought this through carefully. If you agree to marry me, I would pay off all your debts immediately. You and Emma would move into my house, which has plenty of room for both our children. You would no longer need to work those jobs that are exhausting you. Your only responsibility would be taking care of Marcus and Emma." Sarah unfolded the paper and nearly gasped. It was a financial summary that included her rent, credit card debts, medical bills, and even Emma's upcoming school expenses. The total was more money than she could save in 5 years of working her current jobs. How do you know all this? I hired a private investigator, David said without apology. I needed to know what kind of person you really were and what your situation actually entailed. I don't make important decisions without complete information. You had me investigated? Sarah's voice rose slightly, causing a few other cafe patrons to glance their way. I had your financial and legal situation researched, yes. Nothing personal, nothing invasive. Just the facts I needed to make an informed decision about whether this arrangement would work. Sarah stared at the numbers on the paper, her practical mind at war with her emotions. The offer was almost too good to believe, but it was also terrifying. What about Emma? What role would she play in this arrangement? Emma would be Marcus's sister and my daughter. I would legally adopt her and provide for her education, healthcare, everything she needs. She would have the same opportunities and advantages that Marcus has. And what would you expect from me as your wife? David seemed to understand the subtext of her question. This would be a marriage of convenience, Sarah. We would share a home and co-parent our children together. But there would be no physical or romantic expectations until both of us wanted that to develop naturally. Sarah felt some of her tension ease, but new concerns arose. What if it doesn't work? What if Marcus doesn't accept me? Or if we can't get along? Then, we end the arrangement amicably. I would still pay off your debts as agreed, help you get settled in a new place, and we would work out a co-parenting arrangement for Emma if she chooses to maintain contact with Marcus and me. It sounded too good to be true, which in Sarah's experience usually meant it was. But, as she looked at the financial summary again, she thought about Emma's worn school clothes, their tiny apartment, and the constant stress of never having enough money for basic needs. Why me specifically? There must be other single mothers in town who need help. David smiled, and for the first time since they'd started talking, it seemed genuine. Because yesterday, when I was parked outside the elementary school, I watched you pick up Emma. She ran to you like you were the most wonderful person in the world, and you swept her up and spun her around even though you were clearly exhausted from work. Then, I watched you sit on the bench with her for 15 minutes, listening to her tell you about her day with complete attention, like nothing else in the world mattered. Sarah remembered that day. Emma had been excited about a picture she'd drawn in art class, and Sarah had indeed sat with her outside the school, letting her daughter chatter about every detail while Sarah's back ached from carrying heavy cleaning supplies all morning. That's when I knew you were the right person. Marcus needs someone who will listen to him like that. Someone who will put his happiness before her own convenience. I've seen you do it with Emma, and I believe you would do it for my son too. This is a lot to think about, Sarah said quietly. Of course it is. Take all the time you need. But, Sarah, I want you to know that this isn't charity. I'm not doing you a favor out of pity. I genuinely believe you're exactly what Marcus needs, and what I need, to build a stable family again. That afternoon, Sarah picked up Emma from school and took her to the playground instead of rushing home as usual. As she watched her daughter climb the jungle gym and laugh with other children, she thought about David's offer. The practical part of her mind cataloged all the benefits. Financial security, a stable home for Emma, good schools, healthcare, a future that didn't involve working herself to exhaustion just to barely survive. The emotional part of her mind worried about the complications. What if she couldn't love Marcus the way she loved Emma? What if David turned out to be different than he seemed? What if the whole arrangement was too strange to ever feel like a real family? But, as she watched Emma playing in her worn sneakers and too small jacket, Sarah realized that her daughter's well-being had to take priority over her own fears and reservations. That evening, after dinner and Emma's bath, Sarah sat her daughter down for a serious conversation. Emma, honey, I need to talk to you about something important. Emma looked up from her coloring book with wide, curious eyes. Did I do something wrong, Mama? No, sweetheart. You never do anything wrong. But I met a man today who asked me something very important, and before I give him my answer, I need to know how you would feel about it. What kind of man? Sarah chose her words carefully. A nice man who has a little boy about your age. The little boy's mommy died, and his daddy thinks maybe we could help take care of him. Emma considered this seriously. Like babysitting. More than babysitting. Like being his family. If we decided to help them, we would go live in their house. And the little boy would be like your brother. Would I still be your little girl? Of course. You would always be my little girl, and I would always be your mama. Nothing would ever change that. Emma nodded thoughtfully. What's the little boy's name? Marcus. Is he nice? I don't know yet, sweetheart. I haven't met him. But his daddy seems very nice, and he loves Marcus very much. Would we have our own rooms? Yes, we would have our own rooms in a big house with a yard where you could play. Emma's eyes lit up. A yard? With grass and maybe flowers. Maybe. Would you like that? Yes. Could I plant tomatoes like Abuela used to? Sarah's heart squeezed. Emma had loved helping Miguel's mother with her garden before she passed away 2 years earlier. I think we could probably plant tomatoes. Emma was quiet for a long moment, then looked up at Sarah with serious eyes. Mama, would this make you happy? The question caught Sarah off guard. She had been so focused on what was practical and beneficial that she hadn't really considered her own happiness. I think it might, sweetheart. It would mean I wouldn't have to work so much, and we could spend more time together. Then, I think we should help the little boy and his daddy. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah called the number on David's business card. David? It's Sarah Martinez. Sarah, I'm so glad you called. Have you made a decision? I have questions first. Of course. Ask me anything. If we do this, what would the timeline be? How quickly would you expect us to move forward? We could be married at the courthouse within a week if you're comfortable with that. As for moving in together, that could happen immediately after the wedding, or we could take some time to let the children adjust to the idea first. What have you told Marcus about this? Nothing yet. I wanted to hear your answer first. If you agree, I thought we could introduce you and Emma to Marcus as friends initially. Let them get to know each other before explaining the rest. And if Marcus doesn't like us, then we'll work on it together. Sarah, Marcus is a good kid who's been through a terrible trauma. He's not going to reject you out of meanness or spite. If he struggles to accept you initially, it will be because he's protecting himself from more loss. Sarah took a deep breath. David, I need to know something honestly. Is there any part of you that's hoping this arrangement might eventually become a real marriage? Because I need to know what I'm walking into. There was a long pause before David answered. Sarah, I love my wife very much. I'm not looking to replace her or recreate what we had. But I'm also not naive enough to think that two people living together, raising children together, sharing a life together might not develop feelings over time. I can't promise that won't happen, and I can't promise it will. What I can promise is that I would never pressure you or make you feel obligated to anything beyond what we've agreed to. His honesty was both reassuring and slightly disappointing, though Sarah couldn't quite figure out why. All right, she said finally. I'll do it. Really? Yes. But I have conditions. Name them. First, I want everything in writing. The financial arrangements, the living arrangements, what happens if we divorce, everything. Absolutely. I'll have my lawyer draw up a comprehensive agreement. Second, I want to meet Marcus before we tell the children anything definite. I need to see how he reacts to Emma and me. That makes perfect sense. Third, if at any point in the first 6 months either of us feels like this isn't working, we end it with no hard feelings and no blame. Agreed. And fourth, I want you to understand that Emma comes first. Always. If there's ever a conflict between what's best for Marcus and what's best for Emma, I will choose Emma. I would expect nothing less. And I hope you'll understand that Marcus comes first for me. Fair enough. Sarah? Yes. Thank you. I really think this is going to work out well for all of us. As Sarah hung up the phone, she wondered if she had just made the best decision of her life or the biggest mistake. Only time would tell, but for the first time in 8 months, she fell asleep without worrying about how she was going to pay next month's rent.